Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Andrea Weatherhead. I'm a minister here at Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle. I go by she and her. And I can feel the online community participating. I can feel the energy, and I'm sure a lot of you just came for the barbecue. But I actually win because hamburgers and hot dogs are a great draw to hear a talk, right? So the theme this month is Change Your Story, Change Your Life. And Abigail has done an amazing job this month of telling us about how to be the hero of our own journey. She has done another talk after that about how to change the constantly repeating stories that we get wrapped around the axle about by making new neural pathways and making new stories come to bear for us as we get rid of our limiting beliefs. So I thought, what am I going to talk about? Because she's already done such a great job this month. So check out her talks if you can. So I thought I would explore why we tell stories. Why do we do that? Why do we tell stories? And then a little bit about how to identify a story when it's happening. And also share a little bit about reframing those stories from my own personal experience that might be interesting to you, inspiring. I'm going to start with the name of the talk because if you noticed online it said, "Never let the truth spoil a good story." And I had to actually give that title before I'd finished writing my talk, so I quoted my dad, because my dad used to say that to my mother, because they had such different dispositions. She was extremely positive and very optimistic, and when she would tell the story of something they had both experienced, he would just drop his jaw and say, "Okay, never let the truth spoil a good story," because he always saw it in sort of an ironic way. He was British and had a very jaundiced view of the world. And I came out in the world being an extreme combination of the two. So I have my tendency to have my jaundiced view of the world and then my positive side of the world. So just to give you an example, when I was in junior high, we went skiing. I was with my parents, and we were going to go cross-country skiing. Not that many people did it in those days, but we were looking at the trailhead, and there was this woman who was 60, maybe in her 60s, and she was with a young man who was probably 25 or 30, and he was helping her with her bindings and getting her ready with her poles. And my mother gazed over across to the trailhead and said, "Oh, isn't that nice? He's taking his mom out for a ski. That is so sweet. Look at that. He's helping her learn the ropes, and I love that." And my father, just to razz her, said, "Oh, I thought it was her male escort." And so when you have a different point of view, you can tell a whole different story from the same event, right? So, but she saw it that way. She saw it as a loving vignette between a mother and son, and she had such a positive view. She always saw good. And it's kind of amazing because she grew up in Norway during the occupation, and she was a young teenager and was occupied by the Nazis for, several years. And so I think that maybe her sense of goodness came from how horrible things were that she witnessed. And for the rest of her life, nothing could be that bad. And everything was good. And she saw the good. But she was the butt of endless jokes. We were always like, "Oh, come on, Mom, that is so not what happened," But she wasn't discouraged from having her own brand of rose-colored glasses about just seeing good wherever she went. And boy, if her life wasn't blessed because of that. She had an amazing life because of that outlook. Oh, and the reason I bring her up is because sometimes we talk a lot about limiting beliefs in our teaching, and we talk a lot about overcoming things and negativity and things like that, because we have a tendency to have those negative beliefs. But some of you have expansive dispositions. Some of you do see good wherever you go. Some of you have a path that's lit by Spirit, and you have that tendency, and good for you. And I want to celebrate that, and I want to encourage you to keep it up, because those of us who need uplifting need you around, because it's contagious, right? So that's partly why I did that, just sort of wanting to encourage people not to always think that the stories we tell are negative. But she was very connected to God. And I think through that World War II experience, she got that connection really deeply. She knew what was possible. And so she did see the good, and she saw the spiritual truth of situations. The Christian mystic Emma Curtis Hopkins, who some of you have read, tells us to do that. In the Scientific Christian Mental Practices book, say that title 5 times, she says, the lily in the night looks like a different object from the same lily in the sunlight. Yet it's the same lily. So this world in which we walk looks so different by the nighttime of thought. It'll be the same world when the sunshine of pure truth strikes through our minds in its glory. Here in our midst abides the glory of God, right here. Here all is good. And get this, there is a state of mind in which, if we get into it, we shall see what Jesus Christ called the kingdom of heaven. There's a state of mind that is the kingdom of heaven. We believe that we create heaven on earth right here, right now. We can also invent our own hell right here, right now, if we choose. So I think my mom resided in the kingdom of heaven quite often. So the title of the speech, Don't Let the Truth Spoil a Perfectly Good Story, I'm going to amend that here and now in front of you to say, do let the truth spoil a perfectly good story, especially when it's spiritual truth with a capital T. Because we can all aspire to be in the kingdom of heaven as much as possible. The song that Marina just completely did an amazing job of says, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. And then in the chorus it says, I believe what you say of me. Let's do that. That's why I picked that song. Let Spirit lift you when you're telling a darker version of yourself. And sing that song. I mean, songs are great vehicles for lifting, right? If it's not true of Spirit, it's not true of you. So let the spiritual truth ruin your perfectly good stories. But we're not all like Ingrid, my mom. We're not all like that. I'm not even like her 50% of the time. So I want to look into, why do we tell stories? Why do we make stuff up? Why do we make stuff up? Well, first of all, storytelling is one of the most basic experiences that we have of navigating our world. And the thing is, we're not aware that we do it. We just do it. It takes an extremely conscious effort to experience the world without interpreting it, without telling stories about it, without cause and effect. But we like cause and effect. It's comfortable for us, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But without interpretation, we would just be like trudging through the world like a robot, like sensory input, impulse, impression, and there's no meaning. There's no purpose. It doesn't make sense. So we interpret, but it's helpful. It's helpful to try not to. That's a part of being present. We're so persistent about imposing meaning on things that we actually do it in the most interesting circumstances. Let's take someone who has a couple of dogs. They have their dogs, they have a bulldog and a little poodle in front of them, and they have a treat. And you're eavesdropping, and they're saying, do you want a treat? Yeah, and you're saying, I get the treat because I'm the poodle, and I'm so cute and fluffed and buffed, and I'm so good. And then he goes, well, I'm the bulldog, and I should have the treat because I'm so handsome. Are you looking at me? No, I'm not looking at you. And so there's a whole thing that we put meaning on what these dogs are doing, when really they're probably just being absolutely present. Absolutely present. Yes, they want the treat, okay? But probably not in that whole scenario that we just watched somebody put meaning on, right? I'm sure Reverend Karen Cleveland next week with the animal blessing, she'll go into that, I'm sure. So walking through the world without interpreting it, even though it's challenging, it's still a really good way to just be present. Take in all the information that's available. What does the universe have to offer in everything that's around you to take in as information? But it takes practice. It takes practice to avoid this compulsion we have for meaning making. There's also some really primitive brain roots and evolutionary sources to the way we behave, and so we don't have to feel bad about telling stories. Sometimes I feel like I'm like, don't tell stories, but it's like we tell stories, that's how it is. Because we instinctively bind event A to event B, just weaving facts in together to provide some kind of explanation. And this was a really, really early primal way of behaving, because when you left the cave, and you went out there and you heard a rustle in the bushes, it was really a good thing for your survival to say, that's a predator going back in the cave, bye, really fast. Because that kind of associated learning to make a pattern, rustle equals predator, became a way that really maximized our survival capability. But there could have just been the wind in the leaves. There could have been any reason for that. But that's a survival impulse. So we have those impulses to equate one thing to the other. And so while our impulse to fill in gaps of information where we might be missing actual truth or fact can really cloud our vision, it can create an ingrained pattern like the ones Abigail talked about last week, where we get into a cycle of predator, 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 and our adrenal glands are blown by the time we're finished looking at all that. And we jump we jump into conclusions, and then we also can misjudge character, and we can sabotage ourselves just in seconds flat from those patterns. For instance, we have a tendency to have the desire to find evidence that supports our first impression of somebody. We're hardwired to reinforce opinions that we already have, and that's a lens that we look at the world through. Because it's actually much less scary to perceive things through things we already believe than to entertain how scary it is that there's actually a new idea, something that might actually be different and new. That's the primitive brain in action. But when we're being conscious of the fact that our brain does this, then we get to look at it and say, I'm doing that thing. So we can see this phenomenon that I'm talking about that we're wired to do is called confirmation bias. And we see it at work now. If we like a politician's ideas, we're going to like the way they dress, we're going to like the way they talk, we're going to like the car they drive, we're going to like everything about them, because we form our entire opinion based on the first impression that we have. And the same is true for a politician you don't like. And so this is where we are wired at our primal level to embrace information that supports our already formed beliefs, but also reject information that opposes our already formed beliefs. This is called confirmation bias. And the reason that we have this is that we needed to get along when we lived inside caves and we were living in little tribes and little bands of people. We needed to get along. And so sometimes our survival depended on us agreeing, even though we knew the facts weren't really there, because we had to have a social hierarchy that worked. And so that's sort of like the emperor's new clothes, right? People agreed against the actual reality because they had to see it that way to survive. It's really hard to conceive of a more flawed way to think than that when you think about it. Can you imagine if you were a mouse and you thought the way we think? You could say, there are no cats, and then dinner. But we do it anyway. We continue to think that way anyway, because that's been in our survival loop. It's been a primal thing for us to do that. And when people have opinions that are set that deeply, it's been studied by psychologists in many experiments that you can give them as many facts as you want that oppose what they think, and they will dig in deeper. And I say they, but I mean we. All of us do this. This is a universal condition. We dig in deeper to our theories the more people try to oppose us with facts. That's a very primal brain function. We see that today with the conspiracy theories about the attempted assassination on former President Trump. We see people coming to conclusions and creating reasons this happened because they can't stand having a void between an event and having meaning attached to it. And people do it in such a hurry, they're not even willing to wait for the authorities to find the facts. Both sides, all kinds of stuff going on with no facts. And that's confirmation bias. And we all do it, we all have it. But we can be aware of it. We can be aware of it, and when we're aware of it, we can change it, and we cannot be gripped by that. And then lastly, another very, very early primal sort of desire we have to tell stories has to do with just imposing order on a world that is so unpredictable. Are you kidding me? This world is random. This world is really, really changing. It's incoherent. It just makes us more comfortable to just have some meaning imposed on it. And so we do that. And so we want a coherent story, so we make one up. And some of this is survival, some of it's not bad, but it's what our meaning-making minds do. And this imposition of order in a coherent story can also be how you remember the past. So we won't remember details of something that happened in the past that didn't agree with our coherent story that we made up. I mean, I imagine that's a challenge for attorneys when people are on the witness stand. They don't remember anything that doesn't agree. And it's a lot easier to pass on stories to other people when they fit what your theory was. And we like interpretation, we do, we like meaning. I mean, have you ever sat next to someone at a dinner party and they're telling you every single thing that happened in the movie they watched? Not great company, not fun. So we prefer to have some purpose and meaning. But then, as I said, that we're wired this way, all of us. And you know, stories can be so old, both culturally and personally. They can go on for so long that they feel like the truth. And indeed, they've become the truth. For many of us, we have stories we've told for decades. And that is the truth for us. We don't dare actually try to dislodge them. You know, the other day, I got an email from someone I went to college with, and I used to play guitar with him. We played acoustic guitar. And he said, oh, I have a picture of us playing on the beach in Santa Cruz. And I was really looking forward to opening this picture to just remember the past. And I opened it up, and I gazed at it on my computer, and I wept. I wept. Because there in the photo was this absolutely beautiful young girl playing a guitar, tan, fit, flashing smile with young white teeth. Oh, those were the days. And I wept sitting and staring at that photograph. Because I had told myself a story for so long that I was just too big and awkward to fit into the California scene with the bikinis and the buff bodies. But that photo told me something entirely different. I was looking amazing. I looked amazing. Oh, how sad I was to be looking at that. And the reason I was so sad was I had spent years running down my appearance, running down my ability to fit in, this cloddy girl from Oregon going to California, the pale white skin compared to them, all that stuff. I wept when I saw that photograph because it wasn't coherent with the narrative that I had been telling myself for decades. And then it really got me to thinking about now. Like, what am I talking about today in myself that I will know a few years hence is false? What am I doing now? What are you doing now? What are you telling yourself now that you're in a few years going to say, well, that wasn't true. God, I wish I didn't believe that then. What lies are you telling? It's a good thing to consider. So that's why we need to allow Spirit's truth with a capital T to just spoil those stories. And we need to practice stopping to consider all the information available, to see the lily by day, to allow the truth of the kingdom of heaven to reign in our consciousness now, so that you won't look at a photograph 10 years from now and weep. Let that light in. You say, I am loved. I believe what you say of me. So in a summary of all the primitive ways that we are geared to tell stories, we tell stories to fill in gaps of information that we don't have. We tell stories so that we can navigate the world easily. And we tell stories to impose some control and agency on a world that is mostly incoherent, random, and totally unpredictable. And we feel comfortable with those, because we really have a hard time experiencing the world really as it is. But the problem arises when we're not critical about those false narratives that we've been telling ourselves. Because what they're doing is they're shaping the way we see the world, they're shaping the way we move through the world, just as my body image and being left out had done for decades. So, how do we see when we're telling a story? Because I said earlier, we just do it automatically without really noticing. It's not as though there's like a running dialogue in your head that says, that's a story, that's a story, that's a story. No, that's the truth. That's the story. That might be the truth. That's a story. We don't have that. It just goes on and on seamlessly, right away, all the time. And it can be very difficult to distinguish between a story and the event or the feeling that caused the story. And I'm emphasizing feeling because a lot of our feelings are behind our stories, right? So if you're having trouble, if you identify a story, good for you. That's one step to healing, is seeing that story. And if you're having trouble overcoming it and letting Spirit in to dissolve it, go see a practitioner. I really want to encourage you, because practitioners are only going to see the truth of Spirit expressed as you. They don't want to hear your story. They really don't. And I remember when I first went to see a practitioner 30 years ago, they didn't listen to my story. And I was like, why don't they listen to my story? I want to tell the whole thing, and I want sympathy, and I want them to go, oh, poor you. And, they don't. They don't. They just don't believe it. They're not trained to believe it. They only believe in God as you, and that's it. And they lift you with affirmative prayer, and they let that Spirit in that lets you wash away all that BS and move on into the kingdom of heaven in your life. So another way to actually notice when you're telling yourself a story is if you're feeling fear, or maybe you feel some self-doubt, or maybe you didn't really respond to an amazing opportunity that was presented to you. Or maybe you dismissed a compliment, something as simple as that. Because when you pay attention to those emotional and negative responses to the world, you can tell that that's a story taking place. And it has something to do with how you feel worthy or not. Because we often use our emotions to draw conclusions about ourselves and about people in the world around us. But when you take your feelings as sole evidence of what reality is, you're missing a big part of the picture. I'm not saying that feelings aren't a very valid way of interpreting the world, but they need to be balanced with what's really happening for you to get the biggest picture. For instance, I could feel anxious, and maybe I've associated anxiety with unsafety. Well, I feel anxious about speaking on the stage, but the fact is the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle is one of the safest places in the universe. But I still might have that unsafe feeling. Or maybe when you feel angry, the person who you're speaking with is totally wrong. They're totally wrong. Because you're interpreting reality through your emotional lens without allowing in more information. And these emotions are not reality, people. It's only part of the picture. So our emotions are already influenced by things that we've had happen to us before in the past. So when you rely on those to make judgments, not great. So I've got a little 4-step process for you to ease a scenario and possibly avoid creating a story, okay? So let's take a simple scenario I'm sure none of you can relate to. It's, I texted my friend and she didn't text me back. Okay? So let's take that. So the first question you ask yourself is, what am I feeling? You're going to identify that emotion. Okay, I feel anxious. 2, what happened? This is where the facts come in. The current situation, I texted a friend and she hasn't texted me back yet. 3, what am I assuming? And this is where you get to have your story. Oh, I don't know what I said. I can't remember when I last talked to her. Maybe she heard that thing I said about her behind her back. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't really want to talk to me. Oh my gosh, what have I done? She's not in touch. That's a story. This is really important. The last step is, what am I missing? What am I missing? The fact is, I texted her, she hasn't texted back yet. What I'm missing is that there's 100,000 reasons that she could not text me back yet. She could have gone someplace where she didn't bring her phone. She could have run out of juice on her phone. She could have dropped the phone in the toilet. We don't know. But it has nothing to do with me. So when you look at what's missing, then you get to actually expand your perspective and actually cut off that anxiety at the curve because you just made something up. So use those tools because they will really help you live in the kingdom of heaven all the time, like my mom. You know, on a lighter note, when I was trying to think of what to say for this talk, because as I have said, and Abigail's embarrassed because I said it so many times first service, but I thought she did a great job of talking about this topic for the first 2 parts of this month. And I thought, what am I going to talk about? And so I started daydreaming, and I have a weird brain, but I was thinking about summertime and storytelling, and then I thought about summer reading and how people go on vacation and they read trashy novels on the beach or at vacation. And so then I thought, I'm going to create some titles for trashy novels that your subconscious is reading this vacation. So bear with me. Some of them are better than others, but okay, here we go. Twinkies by Moonlight, my romance with food. The mystery of the ignorant lass who would never measure up. Crime and punishment of being unlovable. Endless victimhood, confessions of a middle-aged martyr. You had me at unworthy. Shame and blame, it was never his fault. To every season, there's not enough time. The spike-heeled girl who no one liked. Born to be mild. Forever too poor. Lady Chatterley's hater. The silence of the shy. Go ask Alice why she ignores you. Peyton Place, where all are beautiful except you. The Scorn Birds. If you related to any of those book titles, that might be a title that you need to edit and upgrade and change that story. But I did make light of it because there is a legitimate way to reframe a story by making it funny. You can take a scenario where you're crying on the side of the road because you're just weeping, and then that last bit of weeping becomes theater. It's not real. So you can get yourself to a place where you're laughing at the ridiculousness of the story that you concocted for yourself. That's one way to do it, through humor. But we can also take them seriously, because the good news is that when you look at those stories, if you can identify them, because you're awake and aware and at choice, and you've taken classes here like self-mastery, and you've taken Beyond Limits, and you know how to watch your thoughts, and you know how to see them, and you know how to not be victim to them. You know how to actually be able to master them, right? That's all of you here. And you can become very aware of your subconscious by looking at your stories. It tells you about your values. It tells you about what you desire. It tells you about what you're afraid of. And once you have the ability to watch those stories, look at them and analyze them, you can really find out a lot about yourself and how you see yourself moving through the world. And you can change that story. Because when you're conscious of that, you can then break up those fixed loops of, I'm so fat, I'm so fat, I'm so fat, I don't belong, I don't belong, I don't belong, I'm such a big bone girl, I'm such a big bone girl. I wore a sleeveless dress today. Hello, changing my story. So I'm going to end with a little story with my mom because she started my talk, and it's a bookend to bring her back. But this is an example of just reframing and letting the kingdom of heaven dissolve what the story was that I was telling myself. And recently, I woke up on May 9th, which was the anniversary of my brother's death 8 years ago, but it was making me sad. I was thinking about it. I also had a friend who was in hospice who had taken a very sudden decline with cancer, and I was sad about that, and her daughter had texted me to let me know that I could come visit her to say my final goodbye. And so I was already heavy-hearted, but then I went to say my final goodbye, and I told my stories to her about our antics and adventures, which I think she liked. Oh, and then with a really heavy heart, I drove home. And when I got home in the driveway, my front door was wide open. Oh my God, what a creepy feeling. And I went in, and I should have called the police, but I went in. The place was ransacked, especially my bedroom and my study, drawers pulled out, mattress flung here and there. But one of the first things that I noticed was 3 little squares where the dust wasn't, because I'm not a great housekeeper, and those were 3 jewelry boxes, 2 of them from my mother, who she had left them to me and my sister, and for my sister's kids and grandkids. Gone. All my jewelry was gone, except what I was wearing that day, and also my guitar that I just talked about that was in the picture in Santa Cruz. So I was in hell. I felt vulnerable. I felt violated. I felt scared. I felt stressed out, because what if my sister is going to be so bummed this jewelry's gone? I mean, I took it on myself. So I did all the things you do. You call the police and everything, and I even did some work because I'm such a compartmentalizer. I'm like, okay, I must do my deadline, even though there was in this disarray everywhere. But later that night, I reached out to the neighborhood Facebook page, Columbia City, which is nearby. I'm sort of between 2 neighborhoods. And I thought I should tell everybody, because I wanted to make sure people noticed if someone was casing their house or noticing their behavior and their schedule and stuff. I wanted to share that so the neighborhood would be aware. And I got hundreds of responses that were pure love. Pure love. The very first one was, I just made some cookie dough. Can I come over and bake some cookies to cheer you up? Total stranger. The other one, how can I help you? I have some plywood and I could help fix your back door. Another one, I'm a musician and I would like to get a description of your guitar so I can share it with the musical community so that they can keep a lookout for your guitar. Will you please post a description? The fourth one was really nice. Their consciousness was, well, when you get it back, let's play together. But there were just all these incredible posts, and many, many, many that were just, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Thank you for letting us know. So I did post a description of my guitar and the case, because the guitar was beautiful. I mean, it was already over 50 years old now. But the case was really distinctive, and I thought if somebody sees my case, they'll know that's my guitar, because it was covered with bumper stickers that had all the places I'd ever played and been in my life since I was 16. And one of my favorite bumper stickers on it said, God is coming, she is pissed. That you do not see that everywhere. So that people could see that was my guitar. A day or so later, a woman posted and she said, in 1971, I bought an acoustic guitar with my waitress money. I have moved it from place to place my whole life, and I never really learned to play it. And my daughter hasn't learned to play it and doesn't want to. I can tell by the description that you gave of your guitar how much you loved that. I would like you to have mine. Right? Oh my goodness. I mean, my faith in humanity was so restored by all those posts. And so when I got home and I put the guitar case down and I saw the dust spots with the 3 jewelry boxes, I had this incredible revelation that only could be grace from Spirit, from the kingdom of heaven, where I was told by my mom, hey, that jewelry's not that valuable, and that's not my legacy. My legacy is unconditional love. And look what you've gotten through this experience. Forget about the jewelry. That's my legacy. And that's Ingrid speaking. And that's it. I totally have not been thinking about that jewelry since. My story's been rewritten through an act of grace, but my open-heartedness to actually have that be the story has made me be in the kingdom of heaven relative to that whole event. It's a miracle. And so when we're open to Spirit lifting us that way and we turn our attention to it, then we know that we have mastery and that we can walk in the kingdom of heaven on earth all the time. And so I'm a happy camper in that kingdom of heaven. Let's pray. And so I know that the source of all love, the source of all light, the source of all wisdom is expressing through me now and is expressing through all of you now, because there is no other source. There is only that reality, the capital T, that capital truth of spiritual magnificence that is God, that is Spirit. There is nowhere where it isn't. It's just we sometimes turn away from it in favor of making up our stuff. And so I know for each and every one of us that Spirit reigns in our world. It reigns in our consciousness, in and through us every moment. And when we choose to align with it, I accept the kingdom of heaven for every person here and for myself, seeing good everywhere, seeing good in every person, seeing good in every event. I know that Spirit is the muse to write a new story. I know Spirit is the healing power. I know Spirit is the kingdom of heaven, and wherever we walk, no matter what our primitive minds want to do with us, we have absolute power, light, and love at our fingertips with every heartbeat, with every breath. And I give thanks for that truth, for that ability to be inspired, to rewrite, to know heaven. And I release my word and say, so it is. Thank you.